Vicky. So welcome everyone to the first meeting of ONS for the year. We seem to be in Groundhog Day. So let's just go on with this. Apologies for absence, please, Mr. White.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. We've got an apology for this afternoon's meeting from Councillor Bolton. And just for the record, for those listening on the streaming, we are currently one other member we're expecting being Councillor Hipsey, who isn't on the call at the moment, but otherwise a full house. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. If we go to item 2, which is the confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting held on the 10th of November. Does anybody have anything they wish to say? If not, we will note. Therefore, do I have a seconder for the minutes, please?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And take it all in favour. If not, pop your comment in the box, please.
There's
Nobody's
nothing
attempting, are they, Darryl?
No, they're not, according to my records, Chair.
Right, okay, that's lovely. Oh, and Councillor Hipsey's just joined us. Well done, Councillor Hipsey. Right, item 3, declarations of interest. Have any members got any declarations that they're aware of now? And if they become aware during the meeting, please let us know as soon as possible. Item 4, items requiring urgent attention. I have none. And I don't think any have come in the last hour, have they, Mr. White?
That's correct, Chair. Nothing's come in the last hour. Thank you.
And we have nothing for item 5 either.
That's correct, Chair.
Right, so we move to item 6, which is the Hub Committee Forward Plan. So, does anybody have anything they would like to add? Councillor Kimber, you have a question, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a question about the procurement strategy, which is on page 10. I was just wondering if there's any incentive in that procurement strategy to purchase from local companies or to prefer local companies?
Is that Mr. Hawke, I can see?
It is, Chair. I can take that one. Thanks, Councillor Kimber, for the question. Yes, within the Hub report will be a couple of recommendations around local spend. The first being considering obtaining a local quote for spend under £10,000, which is the threshold at which we can direct award a contract if we so wish, and also setting a target to spend a certain percent of council budgets within West Devon. So yes, that will certainly be considered within the Hub report.
Okay, that's lovely. Is that okay, Councillor Kimber?
That's very good. Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear it.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, please. Councillor Kemp, you say you have a question? Claire?
My apologies. I pressed a button and something went wrong. I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting. No, the question was, is part of the local purchasing strategy the fact that you can highlight a smaller carbon footprint? Is this all kind of tied in with the way that it's reported?
Mr. Hawke?
Yes, Councillor Kemp. I mean, the council have adopted a sustainable procurement strategy already, December 2019, I believe. But yeah, without preempting the report to Hub, yes, that will all be contained within the report.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions on the Hub forward plan? No? Then we will note that. If everyone's happy to note that. If we move forward now to item 7, hopefully we have Mr. Paul Crawford, who will be with us from Live West. He's the Chief Executive. Is he on the line somewhere, Mr. Molyneux?
He is, Chair. Hi, I'm Paul Crawford. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too. Oh, there you are. Welcome to our ONS meeting.
Thank you.
And I believe you're going to be putting forward a presentation for us.
I am, yes, and be about half an hour, and there's plenty of time for questions. And thanks also for some of the questions that were sent in advance. I've tried to weave those into the presentation, so thank you very much. And before I start, I'm also joined by my executive assistant, Nicola Williams. She's on the call as well. Okay. So Daryl, are you driving the slides?
I am indeed, Paul. Yes, I am.
Thanks, Daryl. That's brilliant. Okay, so so if we could move to the next slide, please. As I said, thanks for the opportunity for Live West to come along today. I thought it'd be helpful to give a bit of background to Live West. The organisation in various guises has been in operation for many years, but we may be less familiar to a number of members, particularly those that are new. So I thought it'd be helpful to give some background to Live West. Our development activity focus a little bit on customer services. It's quite a challenging time at the moment in terms of delivering services through COVID, and I thought it'd be quite helpful to give you a sense of how we're engaging with customers, the services we're focusing on, and how we're supporting some of our customers who are struggling from a welfare perspective. And then there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. So Daryl, if we could move to the next slide, please. So this is a chart just showing the potted history of Live West, and as you can see, Live West it has been in operation and in various guises over many years since the early 70s. I guess an organisation that will be quite familiar to you will be Devon and Cornwall Housing, which was established in 1974. And DCH was formed in 74, and also a company called Nightstone Housing, and I'll come back to that in a second. You can see in 88, Nightstone merged with Taunton Dean. And then in 2006 and 7, Penwith Housing Association, which was a stock transfer in Penwith in Cornwall, and Tor Homes, which was the stock transfer in South Hams, joined the Devon and Cornwall group. And then in 2011-12, Devon and Cornwall Housing effectively amalgamated as an entity. We had quite a complicated group structure, so we consolidated our group structure to create Devon and Cornwall Housing Trust. And then in 2015, you'll be very familiar, West Devon Homes, which was a stock transfer from 1999, amalgamated or merged with Devon and Cornwall Housing. And then nearly 3 years ago now, Devon and Cornwall Housing merged with Nightstone Housing Association, and Nightstone was the largest landlord working in the west of England and Somerset to create Live West as we know today. So Darryl, if we could move to the next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of scale, we'll leave this presentation with you as well, so there'll be lots of opportunities to have a look at it at a later date. But on the left-hand side are the local authorities where we have homes. So we have homes in around 20 local authorities, all in the southwest. The third column in shows you how many homes we own. So as at the end of last financial year, we owned just over 37,300 homes. The penultimate column shows you how many homes we have had in development. So that's just over 2,500. And the first column identified that we built about 1,158 homes at the last financial year. And you can see towards the bottom there, you can see how many homes we didn't actually build anything in West Devon in 2019-20, but up to the end of March 2020, we had 134 homes on site or with land purchased. On the right hand side, just gives you a bit of breakdown in terms of the homes we built. So for example, last financial year, nearly 800 of our homes were affordable and social rent, and about 375 were shared ownership. And at the bottom, you can get a sense of scale. There's nearly 1,000 housing associations in the sector, and Live West by size is in the top 20 nationally. But we're probably one of the top 10 largest developers of affordable homes in the country. And last year we were 6th nationally for the social rented homes that we built, and 5th nationally for the affordable rented homes that we build. And our focus has been very much around building homes for rent, really to reflect the demand in and around the southwest for affordable rental homes. So Darryl, if we could move to the next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of company headlines. So we work entirely in the southwest. We have just over 37,000 homes in 20 local authorities. In terms of the second column, our focus is all about being a landlord. We build homes, yes, but our primary purpose is about being a landlord, and we take that incredibly seriously, and it's really important that we deliver great service. So there's a sense there of our satisfaction scores with our customers. So just over 90% satisfaction in terms of overall satisfaction with Live West, 85% satisfaction with repairs, and 87% satisfaction with the quality of the home that our customers live in. The third column just gives you a sense of our development ambitions over the next 10 years. We do have an ambition of delivering 15,000 new homes in the southwest. We do build homes for sale, but we try and limit the number of homes that we build for sale so that the turnover is no more than 30% of the overall turnover of Live West. Last financial year, we built 1,158 homes, and this year, but for COVID, we would have completed just over 1,200 affordable homes. We think that's going to be closer to 750 homes this year, with the many restrictions that have taken place in terms of COVID, and particularly construction and construction sites. The next column highlights how many people we employ. We have about 1,400 colleagues. But in terms of our spend in maintenance and development, we probably contribute to around 6,500 further jobs within the southwest in terms of our supply chain. And again, employee engagement is something that's dear to our heart. We have about 91% satisfaction with our colleagues, and in terms of them recommending us to other potential colleagues, 58% net promoter score. The last column just gives a sense of our financial strength. So we have just short of about £400 million of liquidity available, and we only borrow money to build homes. So that's £400 million just short of available to invest in new affordable homes. We launched last year a £1 billion European medium-term note, which is effectively a Live West bond, which is a very affordable way for us to secure long-term competitively priced finance. We do receive grants, so we are in receipt of £125 million worth of capital grant from Homes England to help build homes across our geography. And just to give you a sense of scale in terms of our surpluses, last year we generated a net surplus of about £61 million. This year our budget was a similar number, but with COVID it's likely to be close to 55 million. Before I move on, one of the questions that was sent ahead of this meeting asked around decision making within Live West. I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview. So we have a board of directors, so up to 12 directors within the company, and 10 of them are independent non-executive directors and 2 of them are executive directors. So I'm a director on Live West board, as is the finance director. We are a charitable organisation, we're not for profit, and we are regulated by the social housing regulator. I think one of the questions was, do we have, are our meetings public? They're not public. We do have a very robust approach to governance, so all meetings are minuted. Those minutes are not in the public domain though. So Darren, if we could move on to the next slide, please. And then the next one. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the homes we have in construction within West Devon. They're all at the moment in Tavistock. So you can see we have about 440 homes currently in the pipeline. The vast majority of those are currently for open market, but we do have 68 for affordable rent and 70 in the pipeline for shared ownership. One of the questions ahead of this meeting was, do we build in rural areas? Yes, we do. And we would desperately love to do more affordable homes in rural locations in West Devon. We just don't currently have opportunities in the pipeline, and that's perhaps something we can have a conversation about later. The bottom half of this slide just really highlights our aspiration. I think earlier I mentioned that we had an aspiration or ambition to build 15,000 homes, and our current plans are closer to 14,000. So you can see on the bottom half of this slide, 13,740 homes are planned, of which just over 12,000 are for affordable rent and shared ownership, with about 1,400 for open market. And obviously part of our plan is very much to secure private finance in order to ensure that we can be confident that we can build those homes over the next 8 to 10 years. So if we could move on, please, Darryl. So I said at the introduction, I'd like to give you an overview on customer services. So the main areas I'd like to focus on are how we allocate homes, our approach to service delivery, particularly with COVID and some of the challenges that that's presented, how we've supported many of our vulnerable customers through the pandemic, how we approach income management and rent arrears, and in terms of evictions that may or may not take place. We've had a couple of questions around fuel poverty, so I thought it'd be helpful to give you an overview of our environmental strategy, and also at the end some contact details in terms of how, if you have any queries as councillors, how you can contact Live West colleagues to have your queries dealt with. So if we could move on, please, Darryl. So in terms of allocating homes, like West Devon, Live West is a partner of Devon Home Choice, which is the principal way in which we allocate homes across Devon. As you'll be aware, there's just over 800 active applicants for West Devon, which is very high demand. And in terms of how long people can wait to access homes, it does very often depend in terms of location, people's needs, and the availability and turnover of homes in those localities. We do also provide the opportunity for people to exchange their homes through something called mutual exchanges. And we have a number of live applications at the moment, but with COVID restrictions, we've had to suspend future applications for the time being. So that's just a quick overview of how we allocate homes. So if we could move on, please, Darryl. So in terms of our approach to service delivery, I think it'd be fair to say that in the last 10 months, our focus is very much around providing a lot of reassurance to our customers that we can provide services in a COVID secure way. That was particularly prevalent in the first lockdown last summer. I think what's become increasingly challenging has been recognising that we've had to adapt to individual needs. It's become clear that people have wellbeing issues, and we have a number of vulnerable customers across our 20 local authorities, and our focus has been very much around supporting them and providing reassurance that we're keeping them safe, whilst focusing on delivering safety and compliance repairs primarily. As we've had to change services, we've been mindful that we've needed to consult with residents. So at every step of the way, we've consulted with residents to ensure that they have a good understanding and are able to shape the services we offer through these challenging times. And I've got some information on that in a second. But what we've always done is regularly communicated either through letters, through our website, or through social media in terms of the service. Sorry, someone's obviously not on mute. So yes, in terms of social media, so that everyone has a good understanding of the services that we have on offer. If we could move to the next slide, please, Darryl. So this slide just gives you a quick summary of the services we are providing and those that are currently on hold under new measures. So we're carrying out safety checks, we're carrying out a full repairs service, and we're mindful that not all landlords are doing that. That's something we're trying to keep going with. I think we recognise that this is an incredibly busy period. The winter period is always busy in terms of repairs, so it's really important that we can try and do as much as possible in a COVID secure way. We are carrying on with cleaning, grounds maintenance, we are allowing people to move home to vacant properties and new homes as they become available, and we are still continuing to sell homes, but both of those transactions, where we can, we will do them virtually or digitally. We are surveying homes, we are processing existing mutual exchanges, and we are trying to limit the number of non-essential customer visits for obvious reasons. Where pre-booked planned repairs are planned, we will carry out those subject to risk assessments. But I think it'd be fair to say that a lot of our energy is going on providing wellbeing calls to many of our customers. Services on the right that are primarily on hold are mutual exchanges, new kitchens and bathrooms, non-essential home visits, the use of communal facilities in schemes, and obviously some of our development activity with customer groups and resident focus groups in the field are currently on hold as well. So if you could move on, please, Darryl, to the next slide. Just to give you a sense of feedback, so I said earlier on that as we change our service, we consult just to gauge people, customers' views. On the right-hand side, you can see that the slide I've just shown you, 86% of our customers are supportive of the repairs offer that we currently have available, and 88% of our customers are supportive of our approach to housing management and neighbourhood management services. There is absolutely, and I'm on the left-hand side now, real support from customers around lockdown and a recognition that we need to work in their homes safely. And obviously our focus has to be on keeping them safe, but also keeping our colleagues safe. I think what's become increasingly clear through this period is that there have been significant concerns with customers around loneliness and mental health and well-being, and that's a focus for us and will be a continued focus in the months ahead. And I think through this digital period, I think there's a real recognition that for many of us, we can work at home digitally, and we have good internet access, but that isn't always the case for some of our customers. And so we've been trying to help those customers who have limited access to the internet, how they can have support so that they can become more digitally enabled. So if we can move on, please, Darryl, to the next slide. And this just gives you a sense of the work we've been doing in terms of supporting many of our vulnerable customers. So I guess since the first lockdown, we've made well over 20,000 welfare calls, really to many of those customers we know who are older, they may have some vulnerabilities, mental health or wellbeing issues. And I think it would be fair to say that around 6% of our customers have said they've struggled with coping through this difficult period. Typical areas where they've had challenges might be access to shopping and medication, loneliness, mental health and anxiety, but clearly a big factor around financial challenges, whether that be losing employment, reduced income, or indeed additional costs because people are at home for longer periods of time, and even accessing IT and children at home and homeschooling have been increasingly challenging issues for many of our customers. We have a tenancy sustainment team, so where we've identified individuals who are clearly struggling, and we have a team of colleagues who will support residents, and we have typically about 50 referrals every week. And we also have a grant fund available. So this is a crisis stroke hardship grant. And we provided funding to over 1,000 customers through the last 10 months, particularly where they have significant financial challenges. And I've got some details around what that looks like in West Devon in a minute. But that's also included providing donations to food banks. So we've donated nearly £40,000 to food banks, particularly leading up to Christmas. And that included a £1,000 donation to a food bank in Tavistock. And it's likely we'll be continuing to do that, certainly as we continue through this difficult period. So Darryl, if we could move on, please. So in terms of support to our residents in West Devon, it's quite a busy slide this, but I just thought it'd be helpful to give you a sense of scale. So if we go into the centre, you can see that we've issued out about 86 grants, totalling around £17,500. Last quarter, we had 68 referrals to our tenancy sustainment team from our residents in West Devon. On the left-hand side at the top, you can see that the average grant is about £208. And the top three areas where grant is spent are for food and utilities, white goods, or social and digital inclusion. And then the bottom bullet points, you can see that we initially identified about just short of 600 customers who should be receiving proactive welfare and wellbeing calls. And customers have been contacted, and where customers wanted ongoing reassurance calls, we have about 155 where we continue to ring on a regular basis to make sure that people are that their well-being is fine. That if they've got concerns, whether that be financial or any other health or well-being issues, that we can try and signpost them to the appropriate authority. You can see that there's 113 additional customers were proactively called since November. And of the calls that we are doing, around 60% relate to finance. And you can see at the bottom, the main areas of concern, as I said, are mental health, incomes tightening, extended periods of lockdown, home costs, unemployment, and there has regrettably been an increase in domestic violence. And so our housing staff are well trained in understanding that and in making sure that we can provide appropriate support and signposting to customers who are experiencing domestic violence. So if we could move on, please, Darryl. I just wanted to give you an overview of our environmental strategy. There were a number of questions around energy in homes. So we launched our environmental strategy last year. It has 4 principal aims. One is around the home, one is about vehicles, our workplace, and our neighbourhoods where we have homes. So if we could move on, please, Darryl. So I just wanted to give you a kind of a highlights in each of those areas, the 4 pillars of our strategy. So in terms of our homes, all homes will be building new from this April. Where we are in control of the procurement process, we will be making sure that the homes have a very high energy rating. So that's either EPC A or a very high B. We have very much an approach to strengthening and improving the quality and the insulation factor of the build fabric of the homes we build, with bolt-on technologies. So that could be air source, ground source heat pumps, photovoltaics, or solar panels. We have the next bullet highlights how many homes do we have that are EPC below EPC C. We have about 32,000 rented homes, of which 8,200 are below EPC C. So we've made a commitment that we will be investing something of the order of £36 million in those homes to bring them up to EPC C by 2028. We've also made provision within our business plan to reach carbon neutral by 2050, and we've included an extra £200 million to help us ensure we've got adequate provision to decarbonise our homes over the next 30 years. We are rolling out smart meters to all existing and new homes. So all new homes that we build will have smart meter, all vacant properties will have smart meters, and we have a rolling programme of issuing smart meters out to existing homes. And where we build homes on schemes and there is the removal of trees, we will replace trees on a 2-to-1 basis. So in terms of our vehicles, Live West and our colleagues and our in-house repairs team do something like 5 million business miles a year. So we've made a commitment that we'll have a year-on-year 10% reduction to try and reduce the number of miles we do. And we've also last year introduced an electric car scheme, initially for colleagues, for colleagues who require cars to do their jobs. And we'll be looking towards rolling out an electric fleet for our vans over the next couple of years. In terms of our neighbourhoods, we have something like 4,000 renewable technologies, so ground source, air source, heat pumps and the like, already in our homes. So we recently employed a renewables team, not only to make sure we can maintain and improve and modify those technologies on our homes, but also that team is there to make sure that customers understand that technology and can make the best use of the technology that they have within their homes. That's something we'll continue. We've carried out a tree inventory, so we have a fairly good understanding of carbon capture within our trees and the storage, which is 3,600 tonnes of CO2, and what's sequestered on an annual basis. Our environmental strategy will also look towards rewilding schemes. We've currently put that on hold because of COVID and restrictions with working with communities on estates. But as soon as we're post-COVID, that's something we'll want to progress and prioritise. And I mentioned earlier, we obviously have introduced smart meters, but we're also looking at a range of education measures around fuel management, switching to affordable warmth, or energy efficient warmth and eco warmth for customers who are particularly interested in the environment. And in terms of our offices, we have 3 main offices in Weston-super-Mare, Exeter and Cornwall, and they're either on district heating, air source heating, or use PV panels. Our approach as an organisation is zero waste, nothing to landfill. So we're rolling out in our strategy of having no single-use plastics and also having annual targets for paper reduction. And all of our 3 main offices have gone green in terms of electricity. So that just gives you a kind of an overview of where we are in terms of environment. If I then move to the next slide, I wanted to focus in on our homes within West Devon and how many of the 8,200 homes are below EPCC. And you can see on this top part of this slide that we have 562 homes that are EPC-D and 69 E or below. So just over 630 homes of our 1,800 homes are not currently at EPCC or above. So our investment plan will largely dependent on whether gas will be available, but assuming gas is available, then we have estimated that we think it'll be somewhere in the region of £2.7 million worth of investment over the next few years on gas upgrades. Where gas isn't available, then we'll be using renewables, and that figure will increase to 4.7 million, which has been budgeted for. And just to give you a sense of what that looks like, we believe we have about 52 homes that require investment of over £10,000 to reach EPCC. So that will be a combination of new boiler, but probably moving from single glazed to double glazed windows as well, and some insulation. But if gas isn't available, then it's likely to be 253 homes where investment will be higher than £10,000. So that hopefully gives you a sense of the scale. And just to give you assurance, we will be doing that work up to 2028. And obviously that's something that we're focusing on from April 21. So if we could move to the next slide, please, Daryl. So just to give you a sense of rent, as I'm sure you can imagine, this is an incredibly challenging time for people nationally and regionally. So what I want to do is just give you a sense of how Live West is performing in terms of rent management and what the situation is within West Devon and how many customers have actually moved on to universal credit, i.e. people whose economic circumstances have changed through the pandemic. So if you look at the chart at the top, you can see there's a number of lines, and basically this is the performance of rent arrears across the housing sector. And so you can see the top line is bottom quartile performance, where rent arrears could be over 3.5%, medium quartile, then upper quartile performance. And you can see the penultimate line is our performance in West Devon. So you can see our rent management is exceptional. We're currently at a position of rent arrears just over 1.5%, which is way below upper quartile performance. And that's obviously testimony both to our customers who continue to pay their rent, but also to our colleagues that support our residents to make sure that where they're entitled to claim benefits, we proactively support them to do so. And you can see on the second bullet point here that we've had about 146 residents in West Devon who since last March have moved to universal credit, and all evictions relating to rent payments have been suspended. They've been suspended throughout the pandemic and lockdowns, and they remain suspended until the 21st of February. And we'll keep that under review. I mean, clearly, if residents are having significant challenges, our priority is to make sure their home is not at risk, and we do all we can to support them. And in terms of that, we estimate that we have only about 4 customers where they're currently failing to engage with Live West in terms of rent payment, and that's something obviously we'll continue to work with. And one of the questions was about evictions, and it's very rare that we have evictions, but they do happen for a range of reasons. Clearly, in the last year, not related to rent, but evictions can relate primarily to either rent or antisocial behaviour. Again, through this period, we've tried to do all we can to support people and communities rather than evict. But as and when evictions do arise, regardless of each local authority, we do engage with the housing teams to make sure they're made aware that that there may well be a family or an individual who is intentionally homeless through that process. So if we could move to the last slide, please, Daryl. So in terms of contacting Live West, one of the questions that was sent in advance was, are you happy to receive contact from councillors? Absolutely. What we would ask, though, is in many instances where there are residents of Live West who contact councillors, I think our first plea would be, can they speak to their housing officer, or indeed if you wish to speak to their housing officer, you're very welcome to. And there's a link at the top of this page. If you go to our website and put in the postcode, it'll identify who the housing officer is for their area and the contact details. If, however, there have been more challenges in terms of residents escalating issues with councillors, then there are a list of both staff and their job titles and their emails, including myself and our Executive Director of Operations, who's responsible for all housing and maintenance services. So hopefully that was a canter through, but a good overview of Live West and our approach to service delivery. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul. That was absolutely brilliant. Really interesting. I've written a list of questions, but I'll let others go first. I think one of the first ones, was that you, Councillor Radcliffe, that suddenly sort of appeared on the scene?
Trying to.
Right. Are you there, Councillor Radcliffe, or shall I move to somebody else? Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can. No, after all that, no, I don't. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cheadle, please.
Thanks very much. I've just got a couple of questions. One is, I'm intrigued to know how you go about setting rents and what represents a fair and affordable rent for the properties.
Yeah.
And the second one is to do with the sort of overall supply and demand equation for these sort of houses. I'm not talking about the open market houses. I'm talking about the ones for rent, and whether there's just an endless demand, or whether supply and demand broadly balance each other out. Thank you.
Both very interesting questions. Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. So if we just deal with rents, so our rents are set by formula, a national government formula. So there are two elements of rents. You might hear social rent being mentioned and affordable rent. Social rent is a rent that is approximately 50 to 55% of market rent. And affordable rent is a relatively new initiative. I say new, it was brought in around 2010, 2011 under the Cameron government. And this is where rents can be charged up to 80% of market rent. So again, based on local rent. So when we set rents on our homes, there are a national formula by local authority that we comply with. And the other issue that we have as Live West, we also have a cap internally. So for example, an affordable rent could go above £154 per week, particularly if it was a large property. But we have currently an internal cap because we want to make sure that not only are our rents affordable within the rent regime, but also that they're affordable in the context of people who are benefit dependent. So housing benefit has deciles around payment. We always ensure that our rents fit within the 30th decile, i.e. if someone circumstances were to change, they were to lose their job and suddenly become benefit dependent, we would know that the benefit they would receive related to rent would afford to pay the rent that we charge. And not many social landlords do that, by the way. In terms of demand and supply, I think it would be fair to say that demand outstrips supply 4- or 5-fold within the southwest. Outside of London and the southeast, it is without doubt one of the most challenging regions nationally to secure housing. And just to give you one statistic, average house prices and average salaries in our region, typically house prices are 10 times higher than average house prices are 10 times higher than average salaries. So for the vast majority of people who are working but on low earnings, they are just not able to access housing through the open market. And that's why there is significant demand for affordable and social rented homes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Councillor Moyes, please.
Yes, a couple of questions. I understand that housing associations are buying up houses that are perhaps being sold quite cheaply to do up and obviously rent or whatever you want to do with them. A couple of people have been somewhat worried that this is stopping young people who can afford to buy something fairly cheaply and then do them up themselves for getting onto this market. Does Live West do this?
No, we don't. Our approach to our development plans this year, 1,300 homes or thereabouts for completions. It is all land bought either on brownfield land or greenfield land, and we don't have a strategy to buy existing homes to do up. We do at times sell homes in local authority areas, particularly where the investment cost is disproportionate. So in terms of the rental return, but that is few and far between. But no, quite simply, we don't have a strategy of buying homes up in localities to do up.
Okay, thank you. And something else, not quite so pleasant. There's been a couple of incidents in my ward where your tenants have come to me because they were sort of getting nowhere. One was complaining about his neighbours, and that actually got sorted out because his flat got flooded. The other one was, I think, more serious. In the same village, a couple who owned their house, and all the houses around them were owned except the one next door to them. Now, they had lived in this house for 47 years, and I knew them quite well, and so do other councillors here. They were very reasonable people. The wife was getting in such a state about the umpteen things that were going wrong with the people next door, who were, I think, I couldn't say violent exactly, but definitely not very pleasant. They've eventually, as I said, after 47 years, sold their house to a younger couple. And I think perhaps that Live West sort of jumped on the bandwagon at that point, and it has got better. But I tried speaking to people at Live West and got absolutely nowhere. Nobody would come back to me. And I was a bit disappointed in this. Okay,
well, Councillor Moses, if I can respond. So firstly, apologies that no one came back. I can assure you as Chief Exec, part of coming today is to listen to your feedback and reflect on that and give you some confidence and assurance that we are a learning organisation. I've provided contact details both in terms of how you can get hold of housing officers, but if at any point any of my colleagues are not diligent in responding, then please don't hesitate to escalate it either to regional managers, the Exec Director of Operations, or indeed myself, and I can give you assurance that I will deal with the matter. In terms of the specific issue you raise, obviously in a public environment like this, it's not appropriate to go into the detail. But I think what is appropriate though is a real recognition that where there, and this is rare, but where there is challenging behaviour, it is incredibly difficult to take enforcement action against individuals. Ultimately there is a sanction that people's homes are at risk if there's persistent neighbour nuisance, particularly if it becomes violent. But I can categorically tell you that pursuing an eviction of that nature requires not only significant evidence, but it needs a multi-agency approach. So that is very much involving the police, very much involving environmental health and ourselves as the landlord, and a recognition that the courts they need significant evidence and really quite often it sometimes is convictions for behaviour, because obviously the last thing the courts want to do is see people lose their homes without there being some solid evidence of persistent, aggressive neighbour nuisance or indeed behaviour. So, I would say to you at this moment in time, and I think the various lockdowns we've had over the last year have really exacerbated some of the challenges around people being isolated, locked down, people's tolerance around neighbours or indeed their own behaviour not being what we would expect. We are trying to manage that as best we can, but I think we can't do this on our own. We do require local authority, particularly environmental health, and indeed the police to engage and have a multi-agency approach. But I have to say it is an ongoing issue. I mean, I'm pleased that you said that Live West had latterly got on top of this, but it is an ongoing issue. We can issue injunctions, but again, we have to go to court, and even injunctions, people can quite often breach them, and their home is still not at risk. So I would say that for me, antisocial behaviour remains an ongoing challenge in many of the communities in where we have homes.
Yeah, they had actually had two other, I presume, Live West homes in this village beforehand. And I also was querying, because obviously Dartmoor National Park, their planning rules and regulations stipulate that only certain people can move in. And I must admit I was slightly concerned that they didn't fit that, but that's another issue. OK, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Musgrave, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was intrigued at the sheer size of your operation, Paul. I had no idea that you were that big.
Okay.
I wondered if you could clarify, are there other operators in the marketplace, in the sector of a similar size? Is this fairly standard, or are you actually way bigger than the rest?
I think it would be fair to say. So I said earlier on, there are around about 1,000 housing associations nationally. By size, Live West is in the top 20. So there are, I think the largest housing association is 150,000 homes. We're not the largest, but I think it'd be fair to say we're the largest operating solely in the southwest. And in many ways, Councillor Musgrave, that size gives us real economies of scale. It allows us to invest at scale in services. And so many of the numbers I showed you before, both investing in desperately needed affordable new homes or investing at scale in terms of energy retrofit and many of the components to ensure our properties are EPC compliant, is a product of being large, being efficient and driving value out of the organisation. That size also gives us the capacity to borrow at scale to fund desperately needed affordable homes. But yes, you're right. It's I think the next largest landlord in the southwest is Plymouth Community Homes, and they own about 15,500 homes. So we're 2.5 times their size.
Right.
Thank you. Could I also just clarify? Your charitable status that you mentioned, that is at the top level, is it?
When you mean the top level, what do you mean?
Well, it's such a large organisation. I wonder if there were other sectors in that organisation. That...
No. So we are. Our parent company is charitable, so Live West Homes Limited, and we do have subsidiary companies, but the parent has control and directs the group. So one of the earlier slides I showed you, we build homes for outright sale. We do that to make profit, but that profit is entirely gifted to the charity to help it cross-subsidise affordable homes where there is limited capital grant, either from local or central governments available.
Thanks for clarifying.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave. Councillor Wood, please.
Oh, hi, Paul. It's Lucy Wood here from Buckingham-on-Coram. I wanted to say thank you, actually, for everything that you've done and for your open attitude. I think us as councillors, we've been terribly worried about our vulnerable people in our area. And for me, this is such good news to hear that somebody has been contacting them, giving them grant money when they need to, when they need it, because I think we don't always know who our vulnerable people are, and you clearly do. So you have your finger much more on the pulse there. So I think sort of on behalf of our communities, I'd like to say thank you for doing that. I'm delighted that somebody's done that, and also sort of funded the food banks. I know you gave us some money in Buckland Monacorum as well, just recently. So just a sort of quick question following that is, who do you kind of work in collaboration with? And I'm kind of meaning by that, you've already said, you work with the police and the environmental agency, but you obviously have a really good grip on who your vulnerable people are, but we in our communities from the council don't. And obviously healthcare services do have some idea, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of joined upness to everything, so that we as communities can be more supportive of people. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, and who you do work with.
Yeah, and thank you for the feedback and also the question. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that the most important thing is to know your customer. So we've spent a lot of time over the last few years really trying to gather information about customers, and that's through housing officers getting to know them, identifying vulnerabilities, identifying people's individual needs. And I think it'd be fair to say that when the first lockdown came, we were really concerned about isolation, mental health, financial challenges. So we set out to contact as many of our customers who we believed could be vulnerable. To be candid with you, many of them said, we're fine, but thank you for the call. The ongoing, of the 20,000 calls, I think we have ongoing calls with probably close to about 5,000 customers who are genuinely those that have a limited network in their locality. And some of that's varied. Some of it is about, so for example, in the first lockdown, we did have instances where people just couldn't get food slots, or they weren't digitally enabled. So we've had our teams provide support, where we've had group schemes. Our support managers have gone in and supported residents with digital training, so they could do shopping, so they could live independently. And so it's really ranged. Where we're into complex needs, I think it would be fair to say that we invariably speak to social services and try and identify someone's individual vulnerability and speak to social services around access. But I think the reason for having a tenancy sustainment team is because people's circumstances can be so particular to them that it's really important that, they're the specialists. So they would firstly identify the individual's vulnerability and then identify whether they've got a network of friends or family in the locality that can support them, and we can advocate on their behalf. Or worst case scenario, if there isn't anyone that can help them, we have put things in place. So that will include, financial donations or signposting them to food banks where they've had challenges around food. And we've also done a lot of support, particularly around benefit and how to maximise benefits, particularly on discretionary housing benefit. And your team have been super in supporting us and working with our teams to make sure where people are entitled to benefits but haven't received them, and we do jointly all we can for people to optimise the benefits they're entitled to. And if you want offline, put us in touch with who would be appropriate, and we can tell you in West Devon who we do the typical agencies that we're in contact with. So I think your point you make is we probably just need to share more of this information more openly.
Yeah.
We're happy to do so.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Thanks ever so much.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Next question is Councillor Kimber, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate that. I'm Councillor Kimber from Hatherley, and my question is about rural settlements. So my concern is for people in rural settlements who often have very strong local connections with family and friends, and they can stretch back generations, as you know. And when they need to move for one reason or another, they can be offered a home away from their support network, which causes significant emotional stress. And I'm aware of one of your homes being sold in a local village for good reasons. But my worry would be that the number of affordable homes in rural settlements is reducing. And I'm very pleased to hear that you would welcome further conversations. So how would we participate in that?
Well, I think, if I dare say, I think as the planning authority, I think this is where, and I know your housing strategy is out for consultation. I think this is where your housing and planning strategies need to be very clear around both demand and location, because that is really the first port of call in terms of there being a recognition that there's a real demand for affordable homes in key rural locations, and I absolutely agree with you to ensure that the next generation don't have to move away because they can't afford to live in the village they grew up in. So I think it is about making sure that your housing strategy and your local planning strategy very much identifies those settlements where you know there is a shortage of affordable homes and where there's demand. And I think that's then around starting the process of allocating land through your local plan, and I think, dare I say, being very clear about the type of demand, because we've had instances where land has been allocated in rural settlements and the Section 106 obligations around affordable have been negotiated away through a range of viability challenges, and really, we would want to stand shoulder to shoulder with yourselves to make sure that where there is a strong demand for affordable rented, affordable shared ownership homes, that we do all we can to optimise the delivery of those through the planning process. And the reason for highlighting to you Live West's financial capacity is I really don't believe money is the issue here. We and many housing associations are financially strong. We have a long-term commitment to help deliver affordable homes. So I don't believe it's about money and investment. I genuinely think it's about making sure that the land is properly allocated through the planning process, and then there is collective kind of sign up from a local authority political perspective to make sure that the affordable homes needed are both identified through housing strategies and land allocated through the planning process.
That's really useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel next, please.
Hello, thank you. I'm Councillor Lynn Daniel from South Taunton Ward.
Hi.
Yes, I was going to ask something on the line of Councillor Kimber's, because we also have a lot of problems with your local people not having affordable housing to buy in this area. But I'm glad to hear there's some thought of collaboration with West Devon about how we try and address this. And I'm very impressed by the work that you do at Live West. So my question is, I've listened to your environmental plans and they seem very comprehensive and impressive. But how are you reviewing those plans and changing them as technology becomes available, particularly with the view of use of gas boilers?
Yeah.
And there are alternatives now, and is it time now to think we need to move away from gas boilers? But I really want to know sort of how you'll review them and change them as the situation with the environment changes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I have to say I think we need to remain fluid. I think the most important thing on the environmental strategy, I highlighted that our approach is very much around fabric first. It's making sure that the quality of the home we build is to a high insulation factor. So that means good insulation, good use of materials to make sure that the thermal insulation of the base home, the windows that are fitted, are to a really high standard. I think then it's about making sure that the infrastructure of the home, so the pipework, is large enough to be flexible dependent on the type of technology that's used. So, for example, for air source heat, you need and ground source heat, you need larger pipework, larger radiators than you do for gas, because that you need an ambient heat within the room. It's not as responsive as indeed gas is. I think we all recognise that the government strategy is for 2025 for gas for new homes to come off the grid. Technology is changing all the time. What we want to make sure is that the base fabric of our homes is resilient and adaptable to change. But we recognise that that the technologies we put in today, we will probably be replacing in the next 5 to 10 years, and hopefully that the home can cope with it because there's the right fabric, and that we will just have to invest in better technology as it comes online. I mean, it's interesting. I was looking at electric cars this morning, and I saw in the paper that the first battery has just been developed to allow a car to be fully charged in 5 minutes. But at the moment, it takes even on it's 40 minutes on electric cars. So already the technology is starting to change. Electric combination boilers are coming on the market now. So we want to, as Live West, want to try a whole range of different technologies, because some of this is new, it's untested, and particularly where gas isn't available, it'll either be air source predominantly or possibly ground source heat. But I think obviously until the government has a clear strategy for when gas will come off the grid and what it's replaced with, I think we'll be dealing with the current technologies that are within the marketplace, and hopefully, as and when they improve, we'll want to capitalise on that in terms of procuring them.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. As local councillor, I actively introduced myself to the local community coordinator a few years ago. That's Alison Knight, and we've worked really well together. And we had an ambition to rekindle or create a resident association throughout Tavistock. I'm being parochial here, and we've really done a great deal in Greenlands estate and to a lesser degree at Torlands. However, with COVID, it's put a bit of a dampener on it. But for the record, I would just like to say how absolutely unstinting and fantastic Alison has been, and as Lucy Wood, Councillor Wood, just said, it was the reason I did that was because for exactly the reason Councillor Wood said, that we don't necessarily know who are the most vulnerable people. And certainly doing that and being able to work so closely with Alison was really good. And in fact, because we had such a well-established, rekindled residents association, when COVID struck, there was the infrastructure there for the community. There was notice boards and what have you. So it was really good. And it was, as a councillor, it was one of the more joyous things to have been involved in. What I would like to say is Alison has supported my concerns about soundproofing, that there are a lot of very vulnerable people with mental health and anxiety issues, which you've highlighted in your introduction, in your discussion. I'm just, if Alison is seeking support, then she said she is trying very hard to do this. So I'm just putting a bit of pressure on you now. Just please support her, because we do have some very vulnerable and as a consequence antisocial behaviour, because people can't get peace and quiet in their little home, and so that's a plug for that. Also, have you looked at modular passive homes? There's quite a bit of discussion going on that, and we know that there might be sort of policy changes needed nationally for that. But would Live West be interested in working with councils and people aspiring to producing cheaper, affordable modular homes, which again, Councillor Daniels was, she's covered that, and those are questions I was going to ask. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sass. Well, firstly, I'll pass on your thanks to Alison, and I'll find out a bit more about the soundproofing scheme. So leave that with me. In terms of modular homes, we have modular homes, and we have a number of all the time. I think it would be fair to say that the technology means that modular homes, passive homes, are very expensive. And so our challenge as an organisation is, how do we build as many affordable homes as possible, which is why we very much adopted a fabric first approach. So most of our homes are traditional construction, and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. We do have modular homes, as I said, Councillor Saris, but I think it'd be fair to say that if we focused our energy in modular homes now, I think we'd be building probably half what we're building, and we recognise that with a desperate shortage of affordable homes, our focus has to be one of volume to the right standard, rather than a smaller number being to an exceptional standard. But I would hope that as modular homes are more mainstreamed and become increasingly mortgageable, because some of them aren't, that's something that we'll obviously keep a close eye on. We do a number of timber frame homes which are modular. They're not fully kitted off-site and then craned on-site, but we do have a number of homes built which are timber frame. But I think it's fair to say the vast majority of homes we build are traditional construction, brick and block. I think the challenge for us is making sure that they are built to a high insulation standard from April onwards, which is what we're committed to do. And we'll keep a close eye on looking at the modular market, and particularly both the quality, the longevity, and the price competitiveness of modular homes.
That's really useful, thanks, because I've been approached by somebody who who said that he can produce affordable housing, which is cheaper. So, as you were just saying, technology is cracking on, thankfully. You know, so maybe I should just get you to introduce you.
By all means, please.
Cheers. Thank you, Chairman.
We've got a number of modular schemes currently on site, so if there's someone who can produce them cost effectively, please pass their details to us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hipsey, please.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for a marvellous presentation. I'm a lot clearer now about what you do. See your vans driving around a lot and deal with some of your customers, but I'd never really understood how the system works. My question really is again about vulnerable customers, building on Lucy Wood's question and Debo's comments. And I speak partly on behalf of a couple of local community groups who have been trying to help people throughout the pandemic, especially here in Tavistock. And one of the big issues at the beginning was actually finding out who was in need of help. It's a harder problem than possibly people imagine. Digging around a bit, I very quickly came across, in fact I knew before, the local coordinator here, as Debo said, Alison Knight, who's very helpful. And when we got there by that route, but I did hear you mention a tenancy sustainment team, which interested me. I wonder if you could just let us know a little bit more about that concept, if you would, please.
Yeah, so it's a concept we've had in place for a number of years now. So you think we're a landlord, a housing officer whose predominant role is to manage the tenancy, the liaison with the resident, and making sure the tenancy they comply with the tenancy obligations, but also if there are any issues, and that they are the first port of call in terms of trying to get those issues resolved. I think when and bearing in mind housing officers may have a large patch, when there are issues of more acute vulnerability, mental health issues, or issues around someone's well-being, quite often the housing officer is able to refer those individual cases to the tenancy sustainment team, who have the time and the resource to actually provide a more one-on-one support and focus. So really this is a team that complements the housing officer's role, where people for a range of reasons may be struggling, and where more intensive engagement or a multi-agency approach to support might be needed. So for example, if someone had maybe mental health issues and they'd had a relapse, and the housing officer or one of our repairs operatives in the field identifies someone, because I think one thing I should say is all of our staff who engage with residents are provided with safeguarding and welfare and vulnerability training, because we carry out something like 100,000 repairs a year, 30,000 boiler services. So our guys and girls in vans who are out meeting residents on a daily basis, part of their job is to also identify whether people are coping, struggling, and if they've got any concerns, to raise it with the housing officer, who would be the principal contact if they felt that this needed more intensive housing management support, tenancy support, and particularly tenancy sustainment support. And that's when they use the tenancy sustainment team to help provide that more in-depth support. And also the tenancy sustainment team will provide a multi-agency support approach. So they will actually be the ones who may well contact social services and start to look at case management and case referrals to make sure that firstly the person's well-being is first and foremost in everyone's mind, but also that they're not at risk of losing their tenancy and their home is, and that they can sustain their tenancy moving forward and live independently.
Thanks, Paul. That's very helpful. But can I just be absolutely sure that in our hats as councillors, and if we are involved in voluntary groups and so on, our first point of contact would be the local coordinator.
Yes, so you can see on the slide now it's Live West, Find My Housing Officer. That if you became aware of a resident who you may have concerns about, I mean, obviously there are issues around data protection and so on, but I think if you wanted to find out who was the housing officer for a locality, that's the first port of call. If, as I said earlier, I mean, regrettably, if there are times when housing officers don't always respond, there are a list of names, both the area manager, the regional manager, my director, and myself. So please, if there are any issues around communication or people not responding diligently enough, then please feel free. I think in the first instance, Councillor Hipsey, I would certainly encourage residents to contact their housing officer, and if they needed help in identifying who that was, then that would be a really helpful role that you could play, because I think it'd be great if they could take control of the issue, but I recognise that's not always the case.
Yeah, sometimes it's almost working in the other direction. Is
absolutely, I recognise that.
Thanks for your very comprehensive answer. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. The last question coming up now is from Councillor Coulson, please.
Hello there. Thanks for the presentation. I'll be as quick as I can because I appreciate we've covered some of this ground already. So some of the houses I've dealt with, the residents rather, a lot of houses in this area, and forgive me if I'm wrong, are on electric only in terms of they're not on the gas network.
Yeah.
And environmentally, I support the idea of not using gas boilers, but the problem is gas is really cheap as a fuel for the end user, 3 pence a kilowatt hour. Versus 20 probably for electricity, and these the residents I dealt with, some of them have built up huge amounts of energy debt to their utility on their utility bills, because simply, as you've already highlighted, some of the houses, the actual insulation at the moment is in really poor quality. So not poor quality rather, but poorly insulated. And I'm reassured that you're going to address that. But electricity itself is it is a more expensive way of heating a property, and the proportion of their income that they spend on their heating is far greater than ours, probably because of their stuck.
Absolutely.
So my only concern is that shifting to electricity, and I'm totally behind decarbonising. Is that that will exacerbate the issue? And one gentleman, he had nearly £5,000 worth of debt because he just couldn't keep his house warm, so he's using the little plug-in electric radiators on top of the storage heaters, and obviously racking up huge amounts of debt that he'll never recover from. Realistically.
I mean, it's a real challenge. I think you're absolutely right. Gas is the most cost-effective way to heat your home today. And I think we've got a range of difficulties. The first one, in lots of rural areas, gas just isn't available. So it's either solid fuel or electric. And so you've got that as a challenge. You've also got the decarbonised agenda. So with the government's commitment to take gas off the grid, it may well be replaced by hydrogen. The jury's out. But the current alternatives, regrettably, are electric. So Economy 7, air source, ground source, PVs, and so I share your frustration. I think the challenge we've got is this is almost a national lobbying issue for government and with energy providers to make sure that there are more affordable energy solutions in the marketplace, and whether the move from gas to electric there's a real concern that it'll put further strain on the grid and exacerbate the pricing regime. And actually, I think we've all got a part to play, and certainly you as councillors and West Devon, I think have a part to play in absolutely lobbying government around providing affordable electricity moving forward, which complements gas coming off the grid and the decarbonised agenda, because I think it's, I think it's the only way that we can for our customers and the wider population who live in rural areas without gas can actually ensure that they'll have affordable warmth for the long term.
No, thanks for that. Yeah, at certain areas I've seen that people are forming, effectively their own sort of groups, energy service companies.
Yeah.
That as a group for a district, it's neighbourhood buying wholesale electricity at wholesale, then set the price themselves as a residents community, a residents association rather. Sorry, is that anything any developments that you could sort of?
Well, it's certainly something we could look at, Councillor Coulson. I mean, I'd almost flip the ball back to you and say, obviously as the Borough Council, this potentially is something that, as and when your environmental strategy is launched, it's perhaps something that could be part of that, and we'd be happy to be a partner in that. But it almost needs, dare I say, civic leadership on something of that, because I think if you're going to get the scale and the economies of scale, it almost needs politicising and be a political priority.
Sure. Okay, thanks very much. Cheers.
No, you're very welcome.
All right, thank you for that. One of mine to go with that, Paul, is that I used to sit on West Devon Homes for 9 years, and up in Princetown there used to be a lot of fuel poverty because some of your properties were still heated by Rayburns, and then there was oil, and people couldn't afford to have their oil tanks filled, etc. So are they the properties that are gradually being converted over to more affordable heating?
We have, as you can imagine, the southwest is predominantly rural, so we have a range of homes that are just not on gas. So we have solid fuel, oil, and as you say, Rayburns as well, and they will be our priority around reaching both EPCC, but also making sure that there is an alternative source of fuel. And I think Councillor Coulson made a valid point. Electricity isn't necessarily the cheapest option. No. It certainly has the potential to be the best option from a decarbonised agenda perspective, but from an affordability perspective, gas is certainly cheaper today than electric, and so it won't necessarily provide an affordable solution for customers. It will provide a decarbonised solution for the long term, and I think this is the challenge we, along with other national providers, are facing, which is there's almost two agendas to tackle here. There's the environmental decarbonised agenda, and then there's the affordable warmth agenda, and they're not necessarily entirely compatible at the moment. We ideally need, electricity to be as cost efficient as gas is moving forward. And I think we've all got to play a part in understanding the technologies that will decarbonise homes, but also what the cost implications could be for customers.
Yeah. My other question is a little bit cheeky. It's the first one I wrote down as you were doing your presentation. You said you have 90% overall satisfaction from your, but my then question is, what percentage of the tenants actually answered the survey?
Okay, well, that's a really good. So the way we do surveys, every month we take a sample of residents, and we have a rolling, so it's a rolling figure. So some landlords only survey their customers every 3 years. We survey our customers every month. So effectively what we do is every month, every year, we sample residents from across our geography, and it's all anonymised, and we ask them some standard questions, and the volume that we take per annum is statistically reliable. So offhand I couldn't tell you how many we do per month, but it's externally validated to make sure that the statistic is incredibly reliable and therefore is able to be externally benchmarked with other organisations.
That's really good. That's very good. Just another question. When you allocate, you have housing within 20 local authorities.
Yeah.
Do you have, is it like a member of staff for each local authority, or do your members of staff know their areas really well? So, you know, if somebody was to phone in, yes, we've got Alison here, and I don't know how far she covers, but do they know their areas?
They do. I mean, so the way we work is effectively we have 20 local authorities. Each housing officer has a patch, and that patch is geographically concentrated, because it's really important that they understand their geography. And so typically a housing officer could have 500 homes, which sounds a lot. But as I said earlier on, they're supported by both managers. So you can see on the slide now, Debbie Waller for West Devon is the area manager who would be there to support. And they're also supported by repairs teams that are geographically focused, and tenancy sustainment teams as well. So I think it would be fair to say that probably for 70% of residents that the housing officer is responsible for, there's fairly limited contact. It's almost like 30% of a housing officer's job tends to be, 70%, 80% of their work tends to be probably 20 to 30% of their customers who are more vulnerable or who have more challenging circumstances, either socially or economically. So I think it'd be fair to say that housing officers tend to know their residents who have more challenging environments more, and therefore are able to focus their time accordingly.
Yes, because within your presentation, you didn't really talk about, and it's not something one would really want to talk about, was antisocial behaviour and how that affects us. But actually, as local councillors, it's probably the most common thing that we hear about. And it's knowing the disparity of those figures as to, you say, well, actually, we have a really good reputation for it. We don't, because that's what many of us actually hear about, and
that's understandable.
Those issues.
Yeah. So I mean, certainly next time I'm very happy to give you a bit more information about antisocial behaviour. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's probably one of the biggest areas that hits my desk.
Yes.
But if you strategically look at the organisation, it's a relatively small activity that our housing teams have to deal with, but regrettably, when they do have to deal with it, it can be very labour intensive. But what I wanted to try and do today was just give an overview. I certainly mentioned ASB. It is and we've certainly found that through lockdowns and through COVID, I think as people's resilience generally and anxiety and tolerance has diminished, and I'm not just talking about our customers here, I'm talking about customers in the wider society. What we've seen is an escalation of complaints around nuisance, because people. I mean, we've had a number of instances where people have asked us to police COVID lockdown rules, and we've been very clear that that isn't our responsibility. That's certainly a role for the police or indeed local authorities. But what we've tried to do is work informally with residents to talk to them about the importance of complying with both their tenancy agreement and behaving in a neighbourly way. But I think it would be fair to say that with people being increasingly locked down and socially isolated, the number of cases around ASB across our geography, particularly in urban areas, I have to say, has been on the rise, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. I mean, in relative terms, experience in West Devon will be relatively low compared to Exeter or Plymouth or indeed properties that we have in Bristol. So it is there, it is on the rise, but in terms of how much of our time it absorbs, it's a relatively low proportion.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome.
I'd like to thank you very, very much for coming along. It has been absolutely fascinating and very interesting, and I'm sure all the members will convey their thanks to you, because it's just brilliant.
Okay,
well, thank you very much for giving up your time, and your colleague hasn't had to say a word. So.
No, but she's been taking copious notes, and she would have nudged me if I'd forgotten to say something. So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your time and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Members, if we can move now to the draft revenue budget, item 8 on the agenda, pages 13 to 44. I'm not sure if Councillor Jury's on the line because he's not appeared on my thing and I haven't pressed the list. So is Councillor Jury there?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Right, so I believe you're going to introduce this and then Mrs. Buckle's going to take over.
I'm very happy to introduce this.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to be able to present this to you, proposing a balanced budget for 2021 for your views. This is a really excellent achievement if one considers the events of the last year and the meltdown in local government finances we were looking forward to at the time of the first lockdown. That we are here is in no small way due to the work of Mrs. Buckle and her team, supported along the way by Councillor Edmonds and the Financial Stability Review Group. And I'd like to record my thanks to them. It also bears testament to our previous financial prudency and to the extensive government support received and a fair 21-22 settlement. You have in front of you the draft revenue budget proposals and on which your views are sought. I'd like to draw your attention to a few points. Firstly, the plan proposes a council tax increase of £5 for a Band D property, 2.11% or just under 10 pence per week. Secondly, in keeping with government policy, the council now receives no main government grant, known as revenue support grant. Since 2009-10, this has resulted in an annual loss of income to the council of some £3 million. In fact, our revenue support grant should be negative. We are pleased that the settlement decided not to instigate negative RSG this year. 3, we continue to work in close conjunction with South Hams, and that arrangement saves West Devon around £2.2 million per annum. 4, there continue to be cost pressures. These are set out in Appendix A and amount to some 434,000. 5, an additional pressure is the effect of COVID-19, both on increased costs and reduced income. The council has managed the changes needed to provide support where required, despite loss of income very well, in my view. This is in part due to government support, but is also down to prudent management of our finances in previous years. 6, on the 8th of December, a draft report was presented to the Hub Committee showing a budget gap of around 104,000. On the same day, the local government settlement was published, and those details are set out in section 2 of the report. Of particular note is that we received a lower tier services grant of £70,000. This and other changes has essentially enabled us to close the budget gap and predict a balanced budget to this meeting, present a balanced budget to this meeting. 7, included in the report is the medium-term financial strategy summary, which shows a projected gap of 116,000 in the following financial year of 22-23 and a larger gap of some 325,000 the year after. So, as usual, much work still needs to be done. The Financial Stability Review Group understands this and is starting to examine options to close these gaps. 8, as a result of the changes and the proposed increase in council tax, West Devon's core spending power will increase next year by some 2.6%. That is most welcome. Sorry, I've lost my thread completely now. It is most welcome not to be looking at a reduction, given the difficult time that is ahead, and our need to concentrate on supporting our communities through the current difficulties and the recovery that will follow. However, it is of concern that West Devon and Shire districts in general will have the lowest increase when compared to other local authorities, and we will continue to campaign on this point. 9, it is worth noting that as a result of COVID-19, other pressures have been recorded in the budget. For example, reductions in both council tax and business rates collection, and a reduction in income as a result of low interest rates. 10, there is also a mention in the report of potential future savings. In particular, the projected income from Fusion has been remodelled, but we are dependent on leisure opening up and getting back up and running. Management fees are repayable from 21-22, and we'll obviously keep a very close eye on this point. 11, there has been a request that additional funds be made available to the community support programme. They have been asked to present a business case and that will be considered by Hub on the 2nd of February 21. In terms of next steps, we're seeking comments and views from the committee on the items that are set out in the report, and I'd appreciate your views on those and any questions. The item is going to come to Hub at its next Hub meeting and to the next council meeting as a full and proposed budget. So on that basis, I'll be happy to receive any views, and together with Mrs. Buckle, we'll attempt to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, can I just say to members, could you put forward questions, please, at the end of each segment as we go through the report with Mrs. Buckle? So we're not saving them all up till the end. So we've agreed that that's the strategy we'll work by. Okay, so Mrs. Buckle, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Leader. Yes, so this is the draft revenue budget proposals for next year, 21-22. The recommendations are set out on page 13 of the report. In section 1, that's the executive summary, and that sets out in section 1.9 in the table there that, as the Leader said, we are proposing a balanced budget for next year for 21-22. And the new budget gap for the year after, 22-23, is modelled currently at £111,000. And then in 23-24, that would increase to £325,000. So that total aggregated budget gap would be just under £800,000 in the period up to 25-26. And if you look at that in terms of the cumulative budget gap, that comes to 1.9 million. And that's the modelling if that cumulative budget gap does assume that the annual new budget gaps have not been addressed. And obviously that's something we have to do on an annual basis. We have to legally set a balanced budget. So going on to section 2, that does set out the changes to the budget report since the Hub committee meeting of the 8th of December. I have got the link there to the provisional local government finance settlement, which was issued just before Christmas. We have responded to the consultation on the finance settlement. A copy of that will be in the members' bulletin on this Friday. And the final finance settlement is expected from the government by the end of January or very early into February. We are not expecting any significant changes, but until we see that final local government finance settlement from Parliament, we won't have final confirmation of that, but we have got the draft finance settlement. So as the Leader said, our core spending power is going up by 2.6%. You can see in table 1, which is in 2.2 of the report, the analysis behind that. So what is increasing the core spending power by 2.6%? And that's mainly down to an assumed increase in council tax. And you can see the government assumption there of an assumed increase in council tax of 2.8%. The table in the chart in 2.3 shows how shire districts, how their core spending power compares to other authorities such as counties, metropolitans, London boroughs, fire authorities, and you can see that shire districts on average got the lower amount of increase in their core spending power of 1.2%. We have had a one-off grant for next year, something called a lower tier services grant, which will be just over 70,000 for us in West Devon. One of the main reasons behind that is the government wanted to put some extra funding into the finance settlement so that no council had too much of a decrease in their core spending power. So mainly for districts, what that's doing is actually offsetting districts' reductions in new homes bonus. So you can see in the table in 2.2 that actually we had a reduction in our new homes bonus amount of 55,000, and that's mainly compensated by a lower tier services grant of 70,000 going the other way. In terms of the council tax referendum limits, for Shire districts, that has been announced at the higher of 1.99% or £5. So £5 is actually the higher amount for us. No limit has been set for town or parish councils for next year, 21-22, and the limit for the police and crime commissioners is £15 for a bandy property. In terms of rural services delivery grant in 2.7 of the report, nationally that allocation has gone up from 81 million to 85 million. There is a lot of lobbying which we are supporting by the Rural Services Network to say that actually if you look back at the settlement funding assessment back in 2013-14, that the Rural Services Network are arguing that that figure nationally should be more like 130 million rather than the 85 million which is in the draft finance settlement. In terms of new homes bonus, I've got a section on that further in the report, but our allocation for next year would be just over 292,000. There's a bit there about audit fees as well. Funding of 15 million has been announced by the government to support an anticipated rise in audit fees for 21-22, and we'll get our allocations for that in the new year. Just on audit fees, our core scale fee was about 30,000 for the 19-20 accounts. At the planning stage, the auditors notified us of an additional increase of just over another 6,000. And we will be putting our annual audit letters back on the audit committee in February, but there's probably another 6,000 of audit fees on completion. And this is a picture seen nationally, which will be coming to the audit committee for consideration in early February. Next year will be a one-year rollover settlement, so similar to that for 2021. That has the advantage of it is simple in terms of the rollover settlement. So what the government have done is they have deferred things like the business rate reset. That won't happen now until at least 22-23 at the earliest. Things like the fair funding review also have been deferred. In 2.5 there, we've just got the table showing the revised budget gap and the changes that have been made since the Hub Committee report in December, showing now the balanced budget being presented to this meeting. Happy to take questions, Chairman, up to section 2.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute. It's still on mute, sorry, Chair.
I think there's a question from Councillor Daniel.
Councillor Daniel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mrs. Buckle. I think whatever they're paying you isn't enough. You've done a really wonderful job. And I was imagining we'd be facing a lot bigger deficit than we are. So thank you very much, and to you and your team. I wanted to say I'm really quite concerned how much we're reliant on council tax increases year on year. It seems the way that things are, it's a lot of uncertainty for us as a council trying to manage our budget and plan for the future when we're just reliant on piecemeal grants from government rather than an actual contribution every year that we know we're going to get. So is there anything that we could make representations on that? Because I'm just concerned of the pressure on local people with possibility of job losses and financial hardship. So thank you. That's my about it.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. Thank you for your comments. I'll pass those on to the finance team. Thank you. Yes, with regards to making representations on the local government finance settlement, initially this was going to be a multi-year settlement. So initially the government were looking to give us our financial figures for the next 3 financial years. But unfortunately, with the pandemic, that hasn't been possible, and the government haven't been able to give us a multi-year settlement. So they've just given us a 1-year settlement for next year, and we are lobbying that we do need those multi-year settlements in the next financial year, so that we do have longer term financial certainty. Because you're right, a lot of the funding streams that fit into the overall budget calculation, whether that's rural service delivery grant or new homes bonus funding or business rates or council tax, there's a lot of uncertainty around those figures, and we are saying to the government, you know, we do need, in order to be able to do our longer term strategic financial planning, we do need to know what's happening with those key income streams. With regards to council tax, the proposal in this report is for an increase in council tax of £5. That would be a bandy for us of £241.63, which is an increase of £10 or £5 per year. So that would be an increase of 2.11% for the Borough Council. With regards to that, I have got a table within the report which shows, it's in 4.13, which shows what an average bill looked like in the Borough for 2021. So, for example, an average bandy council tax in this financial year was £2,066. And that went up by 4%. Obviously, the largest part of that council tax bill is set by Devon County. For example, their share of the bill went up by 3.99% in this current financial year. They can increase their council tax share by 4.99% for 21-22. And if they were to do that, that would be an increase of just over £70 in a bandy council tax for their share. Obviously, we then have the fire, the police, the average town and parish to add on to that. And we do know that the police can put their share up by £15. So when we have notification of all of those precepts, we'll then be able to put all that together to see what an overall council tax bill is looking like. Well, there is the council tax support scheme, and that's a scheme whereby working age claimants can claim up to £150 reduction off their council tax bill, and there's certain criteria they have to meet for that. But that does give some means of giving a discount on the council tax bill under those arrangements for council tax support. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Spettigue, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, as usual, Mrs. Buckle, for all your efforts and the work you put in. A question about council tax. You've already partially answered it. But off the top of your head, are you able to give a breakdown? I think the budget quoted, I think it's 58,000. The increase that we've received in terms of council tax on the figures quoted, was it 58,000? The additional income.
So the additional income, a 1% increase for us, and I can cover this in section 4 of the report. But yes, 1% for us is just under 50,000, 1% increase. Okay. So at the moment, we're allowed to put it up by £5. So that's just over 2%. It's 2.1% for us.
So thank you. So if we were to put it up by 2%, you'd be looking at roughly an additional income of £100,000 over a year.
Yeah, the difference between 1.99% and the £5 limit, which we're allowed to go up to, is actually quite small. It's only a difference of £5,900. So 1.99% increase for us would mean that our bandy would go up to £236. Okay. Sorry, £241.34 as opposed to £241.63. So yes, it is a small difference. It's going up by £4.71 instead of £5.
I mean, just looking at the the way in which other authorities can influence their income on from this stream of revenue. It seems crazy we're talking about such small figures. But I was just wondering, in terms of if we didn't, hypothetically, of course, if we, for instance, forewent increasing council tax for a year, say, then we obviously lose that income for that year, but then on every year going forwards, we're that much income down as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It is, once you lose that money out of your base, then in the next financial year, probably you will be limited to a 1.99 or £5 increase again. And because you haven't increased it in the previous financial year, your base is forever suppressed by that amount.
And actually, exponentially, the suppression exponentially grows, doesn't it? Because you're behind by an increasing amount every year.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hipsey, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mrs. Buckle, for your report. One of the things that leapt out of me, and this is possibly a question for the leader, actually, was the apparent bias against shire districts, which is difficult to understand. I wonder if there's, if you can give us an indication, please, Neil, what is being done about that? Are we lobbying to have that balance corrected, or is it just something we live with?
I think you'll probably find that, Councillor, this is a historic thing that dates back many, many years. There was a bit of a reset, I think, back in the noughties that shifted the balance completely in favour of urban areas. And that balance has never been redressed, as far as I can understand it. The Rural Services Network does a very good job of lobbying on our behalf. I've raised this, and actually we're taking a paper to the Devon Districts Forum on Friday to talk about how we as a collective can kind of leverage our lobbying power to make sure that our MPs and government think about this in a little more nuanced way. I mean, some of the arguments that have been put forward, I know in the past, have been, well, urban areas have a lot more costs. For example, their refuse lorries get caught up in traffic and it takes longer. When you consider that one of our collection rounds you could fit 3 London boroughs into, it's an argument that exactly. It's a bit spurious. So the arguments have not really been accepted by government, but we continue to push them. So, and we'll continue to do so. I hope that
good. Thanks for that. That's great. Thanks.
Okay, Mrs. Buckle, you ready to move on to the next bit now?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So Section 3 sets out the components making up the medium-term financial strategy, and quite a lot of those we've already covered and talked about. In 3.2 there we talk about the council tax limits for district councils, but also that of the county. So the county within their 4.99% can include a 3% precept for adult social care. Across into section 3.3 onwards, again, we show the budget gaps for future financial years. And then in section 4, we set out the assumptions for financial modelling. So in terms of business rates there and negative revenue support grant, in the table on 4.5, I show the actual business rate income that is projected. And you can see that income level starts to go down. So whereas at the moment we're up near 1.6 million, 1.7 million, you can see that by the time we get to 25-26, that figure's gone down to 1.45 million. And the reason for that is, as the leader said, we are predicted to have the negative revenue support grant coming on stream then. And basically what that means is it's our share of the predicted funding caps in those future years. And because we never got any government grant, we're down at 0 now. It actually means that we're in a position where we have to give money back to government. And that money is taken off our business rate income that we receive. So some of that business rate income has to go back to government as a payment in the form of what's called negative revenue support grant. In terms of business rate reliefs, that's in section 4.6 and 4.7. We are very much lobbying for those business rate reliefs, which total 6 million out of our 10 million business rate base for us. So this is where businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure industry have got they've got 100% rate relief on their bill for 2021. And obviously what all of those businesses want to know is, will those reliefs be extended into 21-22? The government are very aware of that issue, and they have said that they will make an announcement in the new year on that. I haven't heard anything on that, but we are expecting it may come out with the final finance settlement at the end of January or early February. But obviously we will very shortly be going into annual billing. So I am expecting an announcement from the government on that quite soon, to allow revenues teams to prepare the bills for the next financial year. I've just talked there in 4.9 about collection rates as well. How are our collection rates holding up for business rates and council tax? In terms of business rates, they're about 5% lower than this time last year, if we compare November 2020 to November 2019. And we are assuming in our medium-term financial strategy that overall our business rate income will be down by about 3%. In terms of council tax, we're seeing a different picture. Our council tax collection rates are holding up really well. So in terms of council tax, we've actually collected 73.63%, and that's only about 1% down on the same time the last financial year. I've just talked a bit there about the Devon business rate pool that we're in for business rates. So we will be one of the 26 pools nationally. So not everyone is in a pool, but the Devon pool will be one of 26 up and down the country. Further on in the report in 4.19, I talk about the collection fund. So this is where all the money for council tax and business rates goes. And that's something which is part of our annual accounts each year. And then in 4.23 onwards, I've just set out the calculation behind the new homes bonus payment. And you can see there in 4.23 that the allocation that we got in purple, 148,000 was our allocation for 21-22, and then we get a couple of legacy payments on top of that. So overall, we're getting an allocation just over 290,000. I think those are the main points, Chairman, from sections 3 and 4, and happy to take any questions on those.
Councillor Cheadle, please.
Thanks very much. Just a couple of questions, Lisa, on the assumptions we've made, particularly for next year. Fusion, what assumptions have we made about their sort of operating model next year?
So in Appendix A, we have set out the repayments that we are expecting in terms of the repayment of the management fee. So that's set out in Appendix A. So in 21-22, we're showing 117,000, and then in 22-23, we're showing 281,000. So that is based on the repayment plan of those management fees, which has been agreed with Fusion. Obviously, before Christmas, Fusion had the very good news that their CBILS loan, their business interruption loan, government loan, has been approved. So obviously that's very good news for them as a business. In terms of what has been agreed, so Council in September agreed the monthly payments to Fusion up until the end of March, so up until March 21. So for example, in January, that was about 56,000, another 45 for February, and 46,000 for March. And the client accounts that I received from Fusion are showing that at the moment they are operating at a lower amount than those amounts that have been agreed to be given to Fusion. That was 292,000 to cover the 6-month period between October and March. On top of that, we have submitted our bid to the National Fund, the 100 million from the government, where that bid is for £80,000, and we're very hopeful of a successful outcome from that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So our assumption for next year and the year after is effectively that Fusion bounce back to the position they were before COVID.
Yes, and that they'll be in a position to start making those repayments of the management fees. Yes, that's right.
Okay. The second thing I was going to ask was the proposal to move, if the trial is successful, to three weekly refuse collections. COVID has probably had an impact on our ability to gather the information we might have required to complete that trial. So have we made any change to the anticipated savings that we might be able to generate for next year?
No, we haven't. So in terms of the modelling, we are still modelling the original figures that are shown in Appendix A there, which was about 50,000 for 21-22 and 75,000 for 22-23. There is a report that is going to come back to members on that, which I think is shown on the forward plan. So at the point that we're able to put that report back to members, I'll just check which month that is, but a report will come back then to members to consider that. So we are still anticipating the annual savings to be between 100,000 and 150,000 per year, but that is dependent on the outcome report and obviously the results of those trials.
Yeah, I just wondered whether COVID had made those trials sort of more difficult to do. And my third question is a tiddler, I think, but yesterday the government announced that they were going to levy zero business rates on public toilets. And I just wondered how material that is to our accounts. How much do business rates on public toilets cost us?
It's between about 15,000 and about 18,000 in a year, but we have modelled that into our figures as well, because we did have prior notification that was going to happen. Yes, I think we've put in 18,000 in the savings schedule for that.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. On the ball as ever.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Councillor Kimber, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lisa. I've just got a question about Appendix A on page 39 and the budget pressures. I think we've added a year onto the Civica contract. And I was just interested in that doesn't seem to appear there.
Yes, that's right. So that amount is within the budget for the FIT programme that members previously agreed. So in the base for 2020-21, members did approve an extra 150,000 for the FIT project and the service provision for that. So with that extension, we are able to pay for that within our existing budget. So that's why there's nothing shown for 21-22, because we can budget for that and meet that cost within the base budget for 2021.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, is that everybody done for questions? Okay, if we go on to section 5 then, please, Lisa.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So with regards to section 5, that sets out our partnership funding levels. There will be a business case being presented to the Hub Committee as part of the Hub report on the 2nd of February around the Community Safety Partnership and a bid there for some extra funding for particularly around youth provision. So that is going to come forward to members as part of the Hub Committee report. I'm hoping to receive that information this week so that it can be included in the budget papers for the Hub on the 2nd of February. With regards to section 6, Treasury Management and Borrowing Strategy, I just set out there that obviously the spending review did mean that the Public Works Loan Board came out and said that they were going to lower their interest rates, which was really good news. So those interest rates have gone down by 1%. But what it does mean is that if we want to do any future borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board, we do have to submit our capital spending and financing plans for the next 3 financial years, and set out expected use of the Public Works Loan Board. So there are now only 4 permitted reasons that we can borrow from the PWLB. That's either for housing projects, if it's for a service delivery project, if it's for a regeneration project, or if it's refinancing existing debt. So those are the only 4 categories now from which you can borrow from the Public Works Loan Board. Section 7, I set out fees and charges. So again, that's going to be in the Hub Committee report. We haven't put any extra income fees in there from fees and charges. So in the main, we'll be recommending to keep those fees the same. So things like environmental health fees and planning fees. And 7.2, that's quite a key point really, that we haven't reduced any of our income streams. So things like our car parking fees, our planning income fees, we're keeping that all at the pre-pandemic levels. So we haven't lowered our income stream levels for 21-22, but as part of the budget monitoring report just before Christmas, there was a recommendation which was approved by the Hub Committee for 220,000 to go into a COVID losses earmark reserve. And as part of the Hub report on the 2nd of February, we know that we're going to get a 5th tranche of COVID funding now. We're going to get another £280,000 from the government. We're not going to receive that money until April 21, but we will be recommending that that money also goes into a COVID losses earmark reserve. So then we would have £500,000 basically, which would mean that if we do get any COVID losses, because we think it's highly unlikely that our income levels will be at the pre-pandemic levels for next year, we've then got some money in an earmark reserve that could finance those reductions in income streams. So that's the sort of strategic approach to fees and charges, which this report sets out. And then in section 8, I just set out sort of timescales for future reports. And section 9 sets out the capital budget proposals as well. And then in terms of section 10, earmark reserves, we are showing there, we've got an appendix setting out all our earmark reserves. So our earmark reserves are predicted to be 3.4 million at the end of this financial year, with another unearmarked reserves of just over 1.1. Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if there are any questions on any of those sections.
Yeah, I've got a question, please, Lisa. Going back to the Public Works Loan Board figures, the borrowing that we have on Kilworthy Park, is the interest rate we have on that more favourable than the current rate from the Public Works Loan Board, or is it best that we rearrange our borrowing on that one, as you said that you can now?
Sorry, that loan that we took out on Kilworthy Park, it was a fixed rate loan taken out at the time, which I think was back in 2003, 2004. That's not a loan that we can rearrange, not without a very significant and quite costly early redemption penalty.
Right. Okay.
So that's not one that we can refinance. We can only refinance loans at the point that they expire. So when they're at the end of their term, at that point, we can then look to refinance them. But unfortunately, if you're in a long-term loan, such as the Kilworthy one, if you try to redeem that loan early, there is a early redemption penalty which applies. So it's not cost effective for us to do that.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on the budget, please? For either Mrs. Buckle or the leader? No? Okay, then I will move to the recommendations. There are 6 recommendations. If you note that number 6 will be taken to the Hub Committee for them to look at when the business case has been made to Mrs. Buckle. So what we intend to do is we intend to take them on block unless there are any objections to that. So put your hands up, whatever. No? Okay then. So what we will do is we will take them on block and assume you're in favour unless by exception, and you put your comment or whatever in the chat box, please.
Just giving it a couple of seconds, Chair, but no one, excuse me, no one
seems to be typing
at all from my PC now. I think therefore, Chair, we can set parts 1 to 6. The recommendation as per the screens is therefore declared carried. Thank you.
Okay, and that they will now go forward to the hub committee, which will then take them forward to full council to be ratified completely for the year's budget. I would just like to send a very, very big thank you to Mrs. Buckle and all of the finance team who work so incredibly hard for this authority, bearing in mind they're dealing with all the grants at the moment as well. So Lisa, please take our thanks back, and a big thank you to you as well, please.
I will do. Thank you very much, Chairman.
That's my pleasure. Right, let's go back to where we are, and we now move to item 9, which is the verbal update from Rural Broadband, which is Councillor Cheadle and Mr. Molyneux, please. So which of the double act is going first?
Would you like to go first, Councillor Cheadle?
I will. Stephen, you can fill in the gaps, hopefully. Last time, I think we mentioned that we were bidding for a new post to help us manage our way through the increasing the broadband coverage in West Devon. I'm pleased to say that the case was successful. The new post is sort of on the statute, but the post holder has not yet appeared to fill it, but that's in the process of happening. And that post holder will work for us and South Hams with connecting Devon and Somerset to encourage progress in the areas where we so desperately need it. And that's pretty much all I'd say on broadband, other than one of the groups we're following that is applying for the community broadband scheme in a village, Clearbrook, just outside Yelverton. They've now had their offer from BT Openreach on how much it would cost to supply them with broadband, and they're considering that at the moment before deciding whether to go ahead with it or not. You may be interested to know that by the time the voucher has been deducted, the cost per premises would be in the order of £2,300. So not a trivial amount. As I say, they're considering whether they want to go ahead with it or not. Not broadband per se, but we had a meeting the other day with Dartmoor National Park to discuss a thing called the Shared Rural Network. And this is a scheme part funded by the government, part funded by mobile telecommunications operators, to bring telecommunications to parts of the country which are suffering from bad reception. And of course, just like broadband, this part of Devon is one of those areas. We just wanted to talk to Dartmoor National Park to make sure that both authorities were going to take a consistent approach, because the organisation seeking to improve broadband sometimes, or they certainly claim, to struggle with things like planning approval for masts and what have you. People want better telecommunications, but they don't want the masts that provide it. So we need to work with Dartmoor National Park and our own planning team to make sure that there's a consistent approach being taken by both authorities, because there's no point having good coverage in one and bad coverage in the other. So we've had that initial meeting with Dartmoor National Park. I think we see absolutely eye to each other, and we've agreed to meet jointly with the Shared Rural Network team within the next couple of months to find out exactly what their problems are and how we might go about solving them. So that's all I've got to say for the time being, but I'll hand over to Mr. Molyneux to fill in the gaps.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Not many gaps to fill in, I'm pleased to say. So we are about to go out to recruitment for the post that Councillor Cheadle said that should happen by the end of this week. Interestingly enough, members will recall we've been working with Sydenham Damerel, and their contract was signed with BT Openreach just before Christmas. BT Openreach are now going through the detailed planning in terms of how they'll mobilise to provide those services. What it has done is a number of community groups who've popped up that are in various stages of struggling with the process, with the providers, in terms of trying to get something reasonable in terms of quotes. And I've had a couple of contacts with a couple of groups who are trying different ways of skinning the cat, as it were. And the other interesting thing is that BT, not to be confused with BT Openreach, have approached us independently to talk about how they can provide broadband services using the universal service obligation. And I'm going to arrange a separate meeting with BT, who are in effect a provider, whereas Openreach are an infrastructure provider. So there are a number of irons in the fire at this point, and I'm hoping that by the time we have appointed a community support officer, we are clear on what the offers and what the options are for our community groups, and hopefully we can have almost like a little portfolio of, if you're in this scale and there's this many properties, this is the best option to go down. So that's my vision in terms of where I see us going, that we'll have a number of different options. We'll talk to those community groups, and then we can discuss with those community groups which option suits them best for them to try and get broadband in their area. So that's where we're at the moment, but it's moving along quite nicely, I think. Thank you.
That does seem very good, Mr. Molyneux. So would we suggest that some of our councillors who live in more rural wards can actually speak to their communities about this, and maybe some of the parishes get together and come forward?
At this point, there's still only me. So I don't particularly want to set hairs running on set of expectation yet.
Right, okay.
So I personally would rather get the post in, the post holder in place, have a clearer view on what those options are, and then sort of come back to members and then sort of but suggest you then go out to the community groups, and then we've got somebody who can coordinate the responses.
Yes, I was thinking of Councillor Pearce, who's very anxious for his communities.
I've been talking to Councillor Pearce about it, yeah.
Oh, good. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Cheadle or Mr. Molyneux, please? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. The task and finish groups, if we could have an update on those, and I think the update is, there is no update, isn't it, Mr. White?
Mr. Hawke is on the call, Chair, but as I understand
yes.
it, the groups are yet to meet since Christmas, but I'm sure Mr. Hawke can expand upon the on my explanation. Thank you, members.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Hawke, I forgot about you.
No, that's fine, Chair. And as you said, there's not a huge amount to update on. The localities task and finish group will meet later this week, and the consultation and engagement task and finish will meet next week, with a view to bringing their concluding reports back to overview and scrutiny on I believe it's the 2nd of March.
That's correct. Yeah.
So
okay.
Does
anybody have any questions for Mr. Hawke, please? Okay, right, moving on then, for the preparation for Fusion representatives attendance at the next committee meeting, which was 2nd of March. What we had thought about doing is the task and finish working group for Fusion was not decommissioned, for want of a better word. So I'm hoping, and I didn't get time to approach Councillor Daniel, who was the chair of that group, if she is still interested in being involved, please.
Yes, I would.
Right. If anybody has any questions then on more of a strategic level of questions about how Fusion are going to go forward, their recovery, etc., their plans for what they see going forward after COVID, because there's no point having with them the annual report that they would give because they've been closed for most of the year. So if I could ask members and members of the council who are attending this meeting, if they have any questions, to either send them to Mr. White, Councillor Daniel, or myself, or all three of us. We will have a meeting around the 12th of February, just after that date, to be able to see what questions we will actually submit to Fusion to seek their answers and plans, etc. Is that okay with everybody, particularly Councillor Daniel?
Yes, it's fine with me.
Right. And are other members quite happy to submit their questions? I mean, they can be pretty much on sort of anything you think is relevant, but we'll work out, you know, which ones we can put forward. Councillor Spettigue, please.
Sorry, Madam Chair, that was just me expressing my happiness to submit questions.
Oh, that's all right. I think I saw Mr. Molyneux with a little light round him. He's flashing.
I'm flash now. No, I was just going to say Councillor Spettigue saying yes, that's fine with him. That's all I was going to say, Chair. So that's two of us repeating that Councillor Spettigue is absolutely fine with submitting questions.
Right.
Are we absolutely certain?
I think we're certain.
I think we are. Right. Okay. Then, if we go to the draft annual work programme, there's not a lot there at the moment for us to look at. It just covers the next meeting. The next meeting has three main items on it, and I can't see my copy of it at the minute because it's right at the back. But actually, those subjects will take a while to go forward with. So the Fusion update and the Rural Band working group and the other task and finish groups. If anybody else thinks there's a burning issue that needs to go on for the next meeting, please let myself and Mr. White and Councillor Kimber know as soon as possible, please. The next item then is the member learning development, Mr. White.
None immediately spring to mind on this one, Chair, other than to say, pick about the point about I'll email all members. I'm conscious not all members are on the call about the Fusion advanced questions, so I will send out an email under separate heading to all members so that those members not on the call are aware of what we're proposing to do for that item, Chair.
Okay. Right, members. Thank you. Oh, who wants to make a comment? Oh, Mr. Molyneux.
Just to say from the start of the meeting, Chair, we'll look at the meeting invite to see if there was any reason why some members struggled to get on to the meeting invite. So yes. we'll take that away as well.
Yeah, mine was, and I think from some of the messages I received, when you pressed into Teams on the calendar and the meeting came up and asked you to join, you joined and it went to Skype and told you couldn't get into business Skype.
We'll look into that.
So yes, that'd be great if we could. It may just be something from when we move the diaries or whatever to one system to another. I'd like to thank everybody for attending the meeting. I have to say the presentation.
Chair, before you close, Councillor Hipsey is registered a wish to speak in the chat box.
Oh,
sorry, Chair. Actually, it's a bit frivolous. I'll withdraw on that. Thanks.
No, go on. You've got the microphone.
Okay. I was just thinking this was on the fly completely. Item 13, member learning and development opportunities. I think I probably speak for a lot of my fellow members who found the presentation by I've forgotten what they're called. Housing, Live West.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. I learned a great deal there, and I wonder if it would be worth putting together some sort of package about that sort of accommodation, those sort of accommodation issues. Maybe get the CEO we spoke to earlier in at some stage to give us a bit more information. I don't know, just a thought.
Okay, we'll bear that in mind, and I think Izzy's on the line as well, so we can take that forward with Izzy, and maybe if a different officer from Live West come, because most of our properties are still via Live West, although there are now many providers of social accommodation in West Devon. Is that correct, Izzy?
She's no longer on the call.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
We can check with Izzy. Councillor Pearce, please.
Hello, Chairman.
Hello.
Just picking up on the point that you made, the difficulty getting in through into Teams through the calendar. If you click once, it won't work. You have to double click on the actual item that's on the calendar for the meeting you wish to attend.
Yeah, no, I was double clicking, and I'd only been on mine with a briefing meeting at 12 o'clock and it worked perfectly.
Right,
so
okay.
I don't know. I think it's just had a bit of a headache because I think we were all getting the same Skype message. So it's a bit strange.
Yes, okay.
Just to confirm, Chair, on that, Councillor Coulson has sent me the screenshot of the actual error message, so I'll forward that on to Mr. Gardner as well. So we'll just to reinforce Mr. Molyneux's point, we'll pick that up outside the meeting.
Okay, right. So finally, if I just say that I think it's been an absolutely brilliant meeting. We have learned so much, and Mr. Crawford was excellent, a very good speaker, and answered all of our questions, etc. And a big thank you to Mrs. Buckle as well, who presented her accounts in the plain English awards that she would win every time, because it's plain numbers awards for her. You know, I've been listening to her budgets for 17 years and I think they're just impeccable. So thank you very much to the team, and thank you all for coming along to the meeting. Thank you.